This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hey, Noah here. In this video, I want to design and create a brewing system for Chef RPG. Currently, you can forage, hunt, and fish for cooking ingredients in the wild, but certain ingredients like alcohol cannot be found in the wilderness. You can purchase alcohol in shops, but I want players to have the option of acquiring all available ingredients in the game without having to buy them. Hence, I think it's almost a necessity for this game to have a brewing system. Let's get started. The first step is to actually do some research on how different liquors are made. I've always been fascinated with the production of different foods, so it was pretty fun to dive a bit into brewing. These are all the alcohol ingredients I want players to be able to craft, so I had to study a bit into each of these processes. All of these items will be used for different recipes, but you can also directly sell them to stores for a quick profit. I can definitely add more of them down the road if you have any suggestions for staple alcohols from different cultures. I found that although the processes for brewing most of these alcohols are complicated, they still possess a lot of similarities. Take whiskey, for example. The brewing process can be simplified to a few steps. You first mix warm water with grains such as barley to create a mash. You then ferment the mash by adding yeast to it, which converts the sugars into alcohol. This resulting mixture is called a wash. Next, you distill the wash by heating it and evaporating the alcohol into a separate container. This collected alcohol is mixed with water and aged in a barrel until it's ready for bottling. Now, modern brewing involves a lot more steps, but breaking it down into key steps is important for designing the brewing gameplay. The other alcohols follow a somewhat similar process. When making wines or ciders, instead of mixing warm water with grains, you would use a press to squeeze the juice out of grapes or apples before fermentation. When making sake or soju, you would use a steamer to steam rice before fermenting. Now that the basic research is out of the way, I have to find a way to implement this brewing system into the game. My view of games is that they're a highly distilled version of real life where you process the components and keep the fun and interesting bits. So unless I want to create a high definition brewing simulator game, it's best not to try to make things too realistic. Instead, I want to give players a taste of the brewing system by creating a simplified version of the brewing process. So we will need 3 machines to do each of these steps. This process can work for most of the other alcohols except wines and ciders. For these 3 alcohols, we will need a fruit press to squeeze the juice. The second step is fermentation, so we can use the same machine. And the final step is aging, so let's create some aging barrels for the wines. All in all, we will need to add 5 different furniture items into the game, so let's get started. I've always found that brewing machines looked really cool inside restaurants, so I think these could also function as a decorative component to restaurants. It might be worth it to add even bigger brewing machines in the future, so players have the option of brewing more quantities at a time. Here we have the 5 machines that we can use. Next, an important decision I have to make is figuring out how players will acquire these appliances. Currently, you would have to go to the furniture shop to buy furniture items, but these machines feel too unique to allow players to just buy them like ordinary pieces of furniture. Another way to obtain furniture pieces is through quests and daily tasks, which would make them feel rarer, but what if you want multiple pieces of a brewing set or just don't want to do quests? After some thinking, I decided the best way to go about acquiring special furniture items is through a furniture crafting system. Some games allow you to craft everything yourself, which I think works if you're making some simple wooden furniture, but doesn't really make sense if your player can craft complex pieces of machinery. So instead, I think the best solution is to allow one of the characters in the game to craft certain items for you, and it would encourage players to pursue social aspects of the game and unlock better items to craft. The character that makes the most sense for this would be Bianca, who is a genius robotics engineer that lives in a starting town. So let's create a simple crafting system first. For now, I just need a simple panel that displays all of the brewing items that you can craft. It uses the same inventory system as the regular furniture panel, so it'll be easy to expand if I want to add more items in the future. I'll probably need to add some more collectible materials in the future, but for now, I just gave the brewing appliances some random item requirements. Now it's important to show what the crafting requirements are, so I updated an existing tooltip to display an image for each requirement to make it more clear. If we hover over the item now, we can see that it shows all the required items in the inventory. I disabled the requirements since I don't want to go collect all the items right now. If we right click, we can craft the item and it transfers into our furniture inventory. Now let's jump into the restaurant. If we go into build mode, we can see that the furniture items are now in the inventory and we can place them all in the restaurant. It's looking pretty good so far, but it doesn't do anything. It's currently just another piece of decorative furniture. The next step is to create a way to import ingredients into the machine and output ingredients after a certain amount of time. Before jumping ahead, I want to take a minute to talk about this video's sponsor, Squarespace, an all-in-one platform for hosting and building websites. They have a ton of great templates that you can choose from, and I recently used Squarespace to create a website for Chef RPG. What surprised me was the amount of customization available, and you can mix and match different templates to create pages suited to your needs. Squarespace lets you insert short videos, so I put one right at the front page, which looks pretty cool. They have a great automated image scaling system, so I never have to worry about if images or videos are cropped incorrectly. Scrolling down, we have a system for collecting emails, which can be linked to Squarespace's emailing system if you ever need to send out important updates. They also have great portfolio tools that automatically adjust the layouts, which allowed me to create a screenshots page where you can click and enlarge individual images. It's definitely a useful platform for artists and designers looking to create an online portfolio, or game developers looking to make a website for their game. If you're interested, check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/pixelarchitect to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now back to the video. So now I want to create a way where we can add ingredients into the boiling vat or fruit press and begin the brewing process. There's a couple ways to go about this. One option is to create a minigame for each machine. Currently in Chef RPG, there are multiple rhythm minigames that you would play to cook a dish. These games are faster paced to match the pace of a typical kitchen. Another option is a slower paced game, almost to the point where it's not really a game, but more of a chill ASMR experience. These experiences exist in games like Potion Craft, where you slowly prep and add ingredients to a pot, or Unpacking, where you empty your box and neatly place the contents around the house. For brewing, which is a slower paced activity than cooking, I think this second option makes more sense. So with that in mind, I want to create an almost ASMR experience where you drop ingredients into the machine and decide how you would like to prepare them. I'll start with the boiler scene since it's pretty simple and it's essentially just a big pot. Next, we'll need some UI so you can decide which ingredients to drop and how you would like to process these ingredients. Here's a quick sketch of the UI. Players can click on the ingredient buttons on the left to drop them in. We will need some buttons that let you choose whether to boil or steam the ingredients, and some buttons below that let you start, restart, or exit. After the art and the UI are done, we'll need to add some animations to the scene since the scene would be pretty boring if everything was static. We should have ingredients that drop down from the upper portion of the scene and into the pot. I also want to give them a little bounce. It's a bit cartoony, but I think it adds to that ASMR feeling. Since I'm still pretty terrible with shaders, I opted to just animate the water by hand. It took a while to draw, but we have an animated downpour from the top and a water surface that rises as the water is added into the vat. I've set it up so that you can process up to 20 ingredients at once, which will result in 20 bottles of alcohol when the brewing process is done. Once the ingredients are dropped, you have to select either boil or steam. Depending on the ingredients and options you select, you'll begin crafting a different type of alcohol. I guess the challenge with this minigame is just remembering which ingredients to use and which option to select. For crafting soju and whiskey, you would have to drop 2 ingredients into the vat instead of 1, which is mostly to differentiate the process from other alcohols so that each process produces a different brewing product. The first step of the process is the most important, since it allows you to decide which alcohol to brew. After the first step, brewing is more straightforward and there are no more branching paths. Now we can do the same thing for the fruit press. Using the same UI layout, instead of adding water into the vat, a big metal press would come down and juice the fruits. I found that the difference between red wine and white wine is actually not whether you use red grapes or white grapes, but whether or not you keep the skin in the resulting mixture. The juice of the red grapes is clear, but if you keep the skin in the juice mixture, you'll get red wine. So for the fruit press, the options available are whether you want to juice the fruits or mash them and keep the skin, which results in a different brewing product. When we drop our grapes in, the press comes down and we can see the juice begin to come out. Now that the minigame is done, how do we retrieve the brewing product? I think the best way to do this is to have a little box with a dynamic progress bar so that players can check in and see if the brewing is done. A slider would be an easy and simple method to show the progress, and when the brewing is complete, the bar will become green so you know it's ready. For fermentation, aging, and distillation, since the brewing process no longer branches out, I felt that there didn't need to be a separate minigame for the time being. Instead, for these machines, I created a simple UI panel where you select the brewing product you wish to put in and it'll automatically begin the process. So now we can input and output ingredients from each of these machines. At the end of the brewing process, we will receive an alcohol product, which you can use as a recipe ingredient or sell to shops for a profit. I think this mechanic helps to add some variety to the gameplay and is a step towards allowing players to create their own unique builds and playstyles. In any good RPG, players should have a lot of flexibility to be creative when making builds. My goal for this game is that you'll be able to experiment with unique combinations, but instead of choosing different builds to defeat monsters like in Skyrim and Fallout, you're creating unique builds to expand and grow your ideal restaurant. So that's it for now. There's definitely potential to add more depth and polish to the brewing system down the road, so it's probably something I'll come back to. In terms of the overall progress of the game, we recently launched the closed alpha for Kickstarter backers, and finally got the first round of players to try out the game. It was a super chaotic few weeks, but it was also very exciting since we finally completed a playable game with a full game loop. We were also able to collect a lot of valuable feedback from players, which will help point us in the right direction moving forward. I thought that players would be able to play for about 5 to 7 hours, but we ended up having a lot of players reaching 20 to 30 hours of gameplay, and a couple players playing a lot more than that. It was very encouraging to hear that players were enjoying it so much during this early alpha phase. Of course, just because some people managed to play for 30 hours doesn't make this a 30-hour game. 30 hours of playtime means that there was a lot of repetitive grinding involved. One game design issue I'm facing is that as your restaurant expands, you need to collect more and more ingredients to sustain the additional customers. However, your speed of harvesting ingredients doesn't change, so you'd have to spend more and more time outside collecting ingredients, which kind of disrupts the balance of the game loop. Adding the brewing system will help alleviate this problem a little bit, and I'll add a few more similar features down the road that will hopefully eliminate this issue. There's still quite a lot of work ahead since there aren't any quests in the game yet, and there's a whole other city area to create. But after the pure chaos that was trying to get the first alpha out, things feel more stable now, and it feels like the game will actually get finished sometime in the near future. If you want to see some of the early gameplay, YouTuber Sharky Games was kind enough to make a couple videos where he tried out the alpha. I'll put a link to his videos down below, you should definitely check them out. That's it for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time.